Let's cram.
For the past couple of months, the US has been trying to rush through bespoke deals with all of its major trading partners.
Brilliant.
This whole deal-making fiasco really kicked off after Trump's so-called Liberation Day on April 2nd.
What a great day.
When Trump threatened massive tariffs on basically everyone. After panic in the financial market.
I just saw today, just to jump in, August 1st was supposed to be absolutely no more deadline extensions. It's happening right fucking now. Get used to it. No delays, no extensions. Let's go. And then China got extended. And then just today, Mexico got extended another 90 days. Like another 90 days. As of yesterday, they were saying absolutely no extensions. And as of today, it's a 90-day extension. Also, none of the deals that are supposedly signed are even really signed. There has been progress. I mean, the EU deal, the Japan deal, there's more of a framework now, and they're getting closer to something, but nothing's in paper yet. Anyway, let's see what they say.
Trump announced on April 9th that the vast majority of the Liberation Day tariffs would be delayed for 90 days, sparking a rush to negotiate what the Trump team claimed would be 90 deals in 90 days.
Yes, sir.
When this didn't happen, Trump extended the deadline to August 1st. And given that most of the countries on the Liberation Day list are still waiting on a deal, this deadline will probably be extended again.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, we've now got enough deals on the table to get a sense of what Trump wants out of them. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look through all of the deals so far.
That's a high-level thing.
Whether Trump is really winning the trade wars.
The belt pull.
In the latest issue of our magazine, Too Long, we dive deep into the current state of America, discussing our ranking. So let's get straight into it. At first glance, it looks like Trump's done some pretty great deal making. His plan is to basically threaten massive tariffs and then demand concessions from the other country in order to bring that tariff rate back down.
Yeah, that has been the game plan.
Well, this seems to have worked. Trump usually extracts some pretty eye-catching concessions, and while the final tariff rate comes in lower than he might have threatened, it's usually still pretty high by recent standards.
Higher than it was,
With the EU, for instance, Trump threatened a 50% tariff rate, forced the EU Commission to make a whole load of concessions, including buying $750 billion worth of American energy products over the next 3 years, and investing $600 billion into the US, before settling for a 15%.
I don't know what he's going to say with this, but it is worth mentioning. I hope he splits them out, because I think the Europe deal is the one where it could be argued that it worked, although the main thing is this stuff is kind of vaporware in the past. In, like, for example, a similar Saudi deal he did in the first term where they promised a certain amount of funds invested in America, and a small fraction of that actually happened. There's these big numbers just never seem to come to fruition after the deal. People are like, yeah, we're going to buy billions of this, or we're going to invest billions of this, but it never seems to materialize. The thing that is real is the tariff rate, and that is 15% on all European goods going to America and none for American goods going to Europe. So there's something there. The European deal could somewhat be considered a success if it's working, but I don't think the other ones can, but we'll see what he says.
% tariff anyway. 15% is obviously lower than 50%, but it's still far higher than the roughly 4% average tariff that the EU was facing before Trump. This is why the deal has caused so much upset in Europe. Many European leaders apparently feel that the deal was essentially a lose-lose, because the EU still ended up with a higher tariff rate than they had beforehand, but they also had to make a whole load of expensive concessions. The deal with Japan, which Trump announced a week earlier, followed a similar pattern. Trump threatened a 35% tariff, forced Japan into making a whole load of concessions, including expansions of rice imports from the US, and a commitment to invest $550 billion in the US, before setting it at a 15% tariff anyway. Again, from a certain perspective, this looks like a lose-lose for Japan, which might be why Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba waited until a day after the upper house elections in order to announce it. The deal with the Philippines went much the same way. Trump threatened a 20% tariff, the Philippines agreed to reduce tariffs on US imports and deepen military cooperation, and then Trump brought down the final tariff to 19%.
Woo!
With Indonesia, Trump threatened a
about that?
32% tariff. Indonesia agreed to reduce tariffs on US imports, buy $15 billion worth of American energy products, and 50 Boeing jets.
Generous
And Trump then
-1
brought
discount.
the tariff rate down to 19%.
Okay.
In Vietnam, Trump threatened a 46% tariff. Vietnam agreed to reduce tariffs on US imports and take steps to limit transshipments, i.e. Chinese exports being rerouted via Vietnam.
Yeah.
And Trump brought the tariff rate down to 20%. With the UK, Trump threatened a 25% tariff on UK car exports. The UK agreed to buy $10 billion worth of Boeing planes and accept new reciprocal trading rules for beef and ethanol, and Trump brought it down to a baseline 10%, albeit with a quota system. You get the idea then. From Trump's perspective, it looks like things are going pretty great. He's getting both massive tariffs and some pretty eye-catching concessions. Furthermore, so far tariffs don't seem to have hurt the US economy as much as economists expected them to. Inflation hasn't skyrocketed, and the US is still on track to outgrow its G7.
I do want to say something about that. I want to say something about inflation real quick. Let me pull it up. Okay. Where is it? Okay. This is how they collect the data to determine the CPI, which is how we determine inflation. Okay? You'll notice right around these tariffs, the amount of hard real data we're collecting has dropped off a cliff. And the amount that is imputed, aka done by a formula, guesstimated, has gone way higher. And so I'm becoming less, I'm not the only one here, there's many articles about this, but people are becoming less and less confident in these inflation numbers. And again, Jerome Powell included in his press conference the other day, where he held rates steady despite Trump constantly pressuring him to lower them, basically said the tariffs are being paid by Americans and they are leading to an increase in good costs. So we're getting mixed signals here, but it just stands to reason that if the cost of importing everything from everywhere, we could go back to this, has gone up, the cost of goods will go up. It might take a little longer because of people having already pre-shipped a bunch of things here and because of little loopholes like transshipping that are happening in certain countries, but the cost of goods will go up. So I'm more skeptical that this has happened with no ill effects. Mostly they've been delayed.
Worth of Boeing planes and accept new reciprocal trading rules for beef and ethanol, and Trump brought it down to a baseline 10%, albeit with a quota system. You get the idea then. From Trump's perspective, it looks like things are going pretty great. He's getting both massive tariffs and some pretty eye-catching concessions. Furthermore, so far tariffs don't seem to have hurt the US economy as much as economists expected them to. Inflation hasn't skyrocketed, and the US is still on track to outgrow its G7 peers. Exporters have also struggled to find alternatives to the US market, and so have continued to sell their products in the US despite tariffs. This allowed the US Treasury to rake in some serious revenues.
True.
The Treasury has collected an extra $20 billion in June, helping it to post an unexpected monthly surplus. Nonetheless, while it's true that Trump's tariff-centric deal-making is going better than expected, there are at least 3 caveats worth mentioning.
Okay.
The first is that while they might be eye-catching, it's not clear that many of these so-called concessions will actually happen. The European Commission, for instance, has already said that its pledges were merely intentions, noting that the Commission doesn't have the legal authority to direct private companies to buy from or invest in the US. Similarly, Japan has already pushed back against Trump's interpretation of the $550 billion pledge. Trump originally claimed that Japan was basically giving him $550 billion to invest in the US as he wanted. But Japan has since come out to say that A, the $550 billion figure is a maximum ceiling, not a requirement, and B, that only 2% will come from actual investment, with the remaining 98% coming in the form of loans or loan guarantees.
Okay.
Similarly, while Vietnam and Indonesia both apparently agreed to reduce transshipments, presumably to stop Chinese imports sneaking in, aggregate data doesn't suggest that this has worked, and both China's trade surplus and America's trade deficit are still growing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about transshipment a little bit more. Again, if you don't know, transshipment is where like there's a 50% tariff on China, so China sends it to somewhere else, they repackage it, and they send it to America, and they get a lower tariff. That's the idea of transshipment. Trump has said if he catches you transshipping, he'll add another 40% tariff. But the whole point of transshipping is that it doesn't get caught. That's the whole point. The whole point is it's hundreds of millions of billions of dollars of goods going to different things, and they don't get caught, dude. The vast majority don't get caught. That's the whole point. So it's, I don't know. It's like saying, don't deal drugs or you'll go to jail. We tried that. It's not the, it didn't stop the crime. It still exists. So again, I've used the Napoleon example a million times, but history is littered with examples of countries attempting to do massive trade blockades or tariffs, and people find ways around it if the demand is there. So I remain super skeptical that they'll do anything more than say, okay, yeah, we'll look into it to stop transshipping.
To another tension in Trump's deal-making. He apparently wants to reduce America's trade deficit, but forcing other countries to invest hundreds of billions into the US is a surefire way to increase it. After all, investing in the US means a stronger dollar, which means more imports and less exports. The second caveat worth mentioning is that while the US economy has fared pretty well so far, this is in large part because Trump has been flip-flopping. So many of the tariffs that he's announced haven't actually come into force yet. Not only has this meant that America's actual tariff rate is currently lower than the Trump rhetoric implies, it's also given businesses an incentive to accept lower profits rather than increase prices, because they don't want to irritate customers when they expect that Trump is just going to reverse his tariffs later anyway. However, if it becomes overwhelmingly clear that the tariffs are here to stay and America's average tariff rate continues to rise, then inflation could suddenly kick in. Similarly, while the US growth rate isn't...
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of what Jerome Powell said. Basically said it's already filtering down into the costs of goods. Things are already getting more expensive because of tariffs and will only continue to do so, which is one of the reasons he felt uncomfortable lowering the rate. They're keeping the rate steady. So I'm just, I think it's a little early to call a dub here, except on perhaps the European deal. The rest of them, though, mostly it's empty promise and then a bigger tariff rate. I don't see the win.
Indeed higher than that of its peers, it's still lower than it was before Trump. The third and final caveat is China. In short, while Trump has been able to bully most of America's trading partners into concessions, it looks like he essentially lost his mini trade war with China, when China retaliated against the Liberation Day tariffs, sparking a tit-for-tat trade war that ended with both parties imposing tariffs of above 100% on each other. China also imposed restrictions on strategically significant exports like rare earth minerals, forcing Trump into a trade truce that ended with China facing a 30% tariff, but making no further concessions. While bullying America's erstwhile allies might be fun, without a deal with China, Trump is unlikely to resolve America's persistent trade deficit, given that it's essentially a reflection of China's persistent trade surpluses. And if you want to know more about this topic, then there's plenty of other outlets reporting on it too. Unfortunately though, every news source has its bias, and no matter how hard each of us try, we'll inevitably miss a story.
That's the whole story? I actually covered almost all this already. I thought there would be more stuff. Okay, well, interesting.